So, last lesson we spoke about data types. Now we're going to speak about how to make the data useful to us. Because just because we've written some information in our program here, right? So, like we've written the number 20 or negative 20, we've written the number 2.5, and we've written hello world as a string, and we've written our booleans. Just because I've written that information doesn't actually mean it's accessible. We need to make that information accessible to the program. The program has to remember to save it and has to use it later. So we're going to create a new file inside lesson 2 because this is still about data types. And I'm going to call it variables, because variables are what we use. Now you notice here I keep forgetting to do the file, and then the file just becomes an empty thing. I need PyCharm. I need this to actually be a .py file, so I do refactor. But I click refactor and then rename, and rename it to .py. .py, and that's how we add that it's actually a Python file. So what is a variable? A variable is a way of addressing information. So when we create a program, we want the program to actually store the information somewhere, and we want to keep track of the information for later use. And so we need to do that, and the way to do that is by using a variable. So how do variables work? Variables are a name. So for example, if I would go a equals 5. So now I've got a variable a, and the name could be of any length. The rule is there's no spaces between it, and the other rule is that there's no obviously no double quotes before. Well, ideally we don't start with a number, and we have general rules for naming that you'll notice as we start writing programs. Different things are going to be named different ways. Like some are going to be all caps, some are going to be lowercase, some are going to use what's called camel case, which is it starts lower and then it has a bump in the middle. Don't worry about the different names for the types of case, but pay attention to it and recognize when I use different, like when I write things different ways. In general, though, a variable, which is what we're talking about here, is the a is a variable now, and it currently has a value of 5. Now I can change the value. I can go a equals 10, and now the value of a is 10. Now, just saying that, I realize isn't very helpful, so let's see what the practical application of this is. So if I say print, which is, I want to actually print out a. So we're going to say if, and I'm going to do the if main, if, I always get that backwards. If name underscore underscore equals the string of main, then I want to print out a. So, got this really simple program. It's just a few lines. It sets the value for a to 5. It sets the value for a to 10, and then hey, it'll run our file for us, and it'll print out the value of a. So I'm going to run this program, and it prints out 10. Why? Because a started as 5 and then it goes to 10. Now, just to make things simple, we're going to take this part and bring it into our if statement over here. And now, one other thing is important. If I comment out these lines, right, which means the program is now, which means Python's now going to ignore it. You notice how the a has a red underline here, and I get this warning. And the warning is what? That unresolved reference a, which means that a isn't actually pointing to anything. We have to assign a value in order for Python to know what the value is, like in order for it to know what a means. Right now a means nothing. So if I run my program again, I'm actually going to get an error here, name error, a is not defined. It says it's on line 4, so if I go to line 4, I see over here, it's trying to print a, and it's not working. So what do I do instead? I uncomment both of these, and I run it again, and now it's printing out 10, right? Which is what our value of a is. Now I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to print a after a equals 5, and then another after a equals 10. So if I run this, it prints out 5, and then it prints out 10. Now, this is a variable. A is a variable. A variable is just a name for a piece of information. That name the piece of information can change, but the name is going to stay the same. So we're always going to have our A is always going to exist in our program for as long as it runs. And we'll talk about, once we start writing code in different blocks, it'll be a little bit different. But for now, A exists as long as a program exists, and it changes its value over the course of a program. Now, I'm sure what you're asking, does it have to be a number? Nope, it can change to a string, right? We can write 10, and notice now it's in double quotes, so it's a string. But just to make it clear, I'm going to write out the word 10, save my program, Control S, and then run my program again, and now it says 5 and 10, right? Python lets us change what kind of data a variable is storing. Now notice here it's 1 equals. This is what we use 1 equals for. We use 1 equals to say this equals this. This has this value. And then we use the double equals to say this is that. If this, we use the double equals to compare, we use the single equals to assign. So this has this value, or this is, or I'm comparing this to that. And lastly, just to show you that we can do it, we're going to do A equals true and print A again and run my program, and hey, it printed out true. Why? Because true is a Boolean, so it doesn't have to be inside quote marks. That is a variable. Now we can have multiple variables, so bo. All right, so I can have a variable called b, and that's going to equal 10.4, right? And we can print b. Now, an important thing to know is, in general, we want our variables really to have meaningful names. That's the one thing we want. And the other thing is there are some words that we can't actually name our variables. For example, Python knows that the word true with a capital T means a value is true. Therefore, we never write. Therefore, we can never write true as the name for a variable, because true is a reserved word. Python reserves it to use it to mean something else. And there's a bunch of other words that exist like that, and you'll naturally come across them. PyCharm is very convenient for you. It'll highlight those in a specific color. So if you're trying to do, if you use a gray, if it's not like the same gray, white, or whatever the color of the letter A is when you try to assign a value to it, then you will know that it's probably reserved and it's probably used for something else inside PyCharm. That is why you want to have descriptive names and slightly longer names, which will make it easier to know what that thing is supposed to do and harder for it to have already been a reserved word, which is a word that Python uses. So that's variables in a nutshell. Variables are just a way to address information. As always, if you have any questions, let me know.